you?
Hey, Josh. I'm pretty good.
This is take 2, by the way. So if we seem a little disingenuous, it's because we've just done
Take 27.
Take 27, actually. Good to see you. We were just talking about that we haven't seen each other since we were on a film together, Weevil, back in 2017. And we were working with Mark Lipkin. Yes. Yep. Yeah. I haven't heard from Mark. I want to get him on the show actually, because he's writing another film and he's just like, he's one of those guys who's just I don't think he'll ever give up, and he's had some pretty decent challenges, but he's a trip to work with. Sorry, Mark, but functioning alcoholic, but super smart. Like you would get amendments from him like at 2 a.m. in the morning and you'd be like, I'm not really sure what you're trying to say. He's like, oh yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. I was, a few wines and whiskeys. I remember, so I went out to his farm to do like a character shoot for a bunch of actors. Actually, remember Christina Arampazzi?
Yes, Greek. I have to say yes on the camera.
She was a Greek girl in your,
I think so.
In your class when I was doing it. And you might even know David Beamish.
No,
he's just done a bunch of workshops. Anyways, so we went out to the farm. You never made it to the farm, did you? Or you just came out into the town?
No, he was talking to me about going out to the farm, but I think that just the shoot that I did was just at that pub from memory.
Yes. Yeah. So I went out there to do a shoot for these actors, and it was like a military thing, and we sort of, we shot it like as if it was like a short film, but it was all stills for their profile. But I camped out there that night to do some background and what have you, and just get a sense of the place and, whatever, be an actor. And Dave and I were like, it's like a 10-minute walk from his house over this hill and down into this valley, and we were camped out. And Mark comes over at like 11:30 at night with a bottle of cognac, right, okay, like a $270 bottle of cognac.
Jeez.
And a rifle.
Yeah. A rifle.
So we're having on cognac, firing shots into the night.
Yeah.
And that's just the kind of guy he is. Yeah.
Well, he's actually pretty inspirational from what you're trying to do, because he's someone that goes out there and just does it and just creates films. And then, I don't know how he gets his financing, but he's obviously doesn't have huge funding. It's a low budget. Yeah. And, but he just does it. It's just his passion. So it's a good sort of, it'd be really interesting to talk to him about how he does it and why he does it. And,
Yes, it would. Because he was very sort of Loctite about that. But he sort of told us in the beginning, he's like, the money that exists for this is there. There's not going to be any more, but I don't have to rely on anyone to get to the next stage. And albeit you're doing it for free, it's definitely happening. We're not going to get there and it not happen. And I'm definitely taking it to the States, and I've got enough in the bank to make that happen. So that was pretty inspiring. And he just loves it. And albeit he's a bit of he could be a little bit more organized. It was a blast. It was an absolute blast. But I remember we rolled up second day of shooting. I want to say second day of shooting. Yeah. And there was a scene where is it SES? Like if there's a fire.
SES, State Emergency Services. Yeah.
Worker is supposed to stop me and my character in the car and say, hey, you can't go down here. You've got to turn around. And he's like, all right, so where's the extra for that? And everyone was like, didn't you book one? He's like, no, didn't you? Didn't even book an extra for this part. So they got the sound guy to do it. And it was hilarious. And unfortunately, his line didn't, I pull up and I'm like, so what's the problem, man? We need to get through. And he's like, I think there's a fire or something. You know what I mean? Like this. And it was like definitely the take of the whole film. It was hilarious. And then of course it didn't work, but it was gold. And he's like, and then what did he say? He said something like, my safety is your concern. Like this. He could have just gone back to front, but it was just perfect. Because he'd just been given he's like, just say something. And so we met at TAFTA. You were my first teacher out of the gate back then. How long have you been teaching at TAFTA?
Oh gosh, must be. We're in East Melbourne, and that was probably going back about 12 years.
Oh shit!
Yeah, and then Richmond for a year, and then Brunswick for a few years. So probably about 12 years.
Wow, still at Brunswick. Last I checked. Yeah. I think they've done a lot of work on that place. And yeah. And you're still going, still
going. Yep, still standing.
And how's your class evolved over that time?
How's it evolved? You mean my teaching?
Like if I was to walk onto the 20 week, are you still the guy for that part of the 20 week, or are you doing a different section now? Or?
No, pretty much. It's I start off the course and I teach the basics. So I teach the camera basics, so and sort of acting basics, so a bit of script analysis, sort of taking you through the process, because it's maybe 6 or 7 sessions, so it's quite brief, but just setting you up with a technique, a blueprint to then approach any of the other work that you do. So really focusing on acting technique in general, and then also applying it to scene work in front of film and TV.
I remember my scene with Melody. You're not Melody, Malika. Malika,
yeah.
And it was that office scene, and you're like,
oh.
So let's do that as if you're on cocaine.
Yeah,
because that'll get you halfway to the speed you need to be at. that thing that new actors do, where they're looking for every dramatic pause that they can fucking find. I was saying to you earlier, I was in a workshop with Creve. I didn't know how to pronounce his name until I did the class. I always thought it was Creve Stenders, and he's just directed and it's out at the cinemas now. Danger Close with Travis Fimmel, and my other acting coach Miles Pollard was in it as well.
Oh yeah.
And he did Red Dog, and he was talking about the same sort of discussion that you have about energy and what have you. And the guy that I was doing my scene with, I feel like he's been around for a while but hasn't done a lot of training. So it was weird how they set it up, because they just sent out the full script and like 4 different scenes, and then another full script and 4 different scenes, and then matched you with someone from wherever and said, don't rehearse this scene, pick a scene together somehow, which in itself posed a lot of problems if it wasn't a clear gender distinction or whatever. So he and I had this weird moment of, he wanted what seemed to be the more like domineering part of this scene.
Yeah, okay.
So there's this, I don't know you, I don't want to be a dick, but I really think that I'm more suited to that part, and blah, blah, blah. So anyways, we picked this scene. It eventually, actually, as we read it, we both realized that we were actually more suited to the other, and he contacted me and we flipped it. But he was doing that thing. He had this giant monologue, and it's like military monologue, and his pauses were so great that the line girl kept cutting him off. And he'd set a precedence by not knowing his lines properly either. He was super nervous, poor guy, and it didn't help. And unfortunately, Creve just wrapped up his end of the close up, because he was shooting it as well, and then he just bailed on the class. This guy, and it was fuck. And that's when we were walking into the class, because I went up with a friend of mine, Reese, to do the course, and you feel that little bubble of nerves, because it's not like just a teacher. It's like when you go into those casting workshops, you can't help but feel like, this could change my life if I really smash it, and it was just that internal dialogue to change it around and go, well, you're probably going to get a lot more out of it if you fuck it up, and he works you through a fuck up. And you go, oh, that's where I need some work. I mean, it's a great way to spin it anyways. When you bomb. But speaking of training, you trained with Uta Hagen. Tell me. Talk to me.
Well, it was pretty amazing. There's a lot to tell, I guess. So I guess I'll start when I moved to New York when I was a much younger man. This is back in, I think, 93, I think it is.
Wow.
92, maybe 92. I'm pretty hazy on dates.
Was Giuliani in power then?
Yeah, Giuliani was in power, and it was interesting because New York really cleaned up in that.
Yes,
I saw it go from being really pretty, because I'd travelled there before, and I'd been in New York, and I travelled all around the States with a mate of mine, and I remember going to Times Square for the first time and getting ripped off because there was these guys on the street, and they had this 3-card Monty or something, this scam. And I fell for it. I think I was about 20 or 18 or 19 or something. And they spin the dice, and I kept winning. And like, if you play just the next round, you can win this radio cassette or something. It was showing my age way back. I was like, should I do it? Yeah, I'll do it. And of course, when it got to the bit more money, I lost. And I was like, And they're like, but you can win again. And I was like, no, I realized I've been conned.
Yeah.
And I left. But when I went back, it had completely cleaned up. It was just a different center. It was amazing.
Well, I first went there in 99, and my dad had been there in the 80s working, and he'd been mugged. And not brutally, just cough it up. And so when I went there, I was just turned 18, and I was on my own, and I was catching the subway, and I was falling asleep. And I was freaking out. I'm going to get fucking mugged. I'm going to get rolled. And then, over the next couple of days or whatever, everyone was sort of educating me on what the mayor had done. And now it was so safe and so friendly and so awesome. Although I lived there just before I met you, actually, and I was ripped off in Times Square too, just for a different product. But
probably the same guys.
Yeah. So you went out there in 99. Yeah. And
so you were, so I went there in...
Oh, sorry, no, you went 93. Sorry, I went out there in 99.
Yeah, 92, 93. And I moved to New York because I wanted to be an actor, and I'd met someone in Australia who actually had her book. I think back then it was either Respect for Acting or Challenge for the Actor. And so I thought, this is interesting, because I'd tried a lot of different things in my life, and I thought I've got to give this acting a go. So I moved there, and and I started training. I got a visa, a full-time student visa, and started studying, and then auditioned for Uta, and then spent probably 3 years with her.
So let me backtrack for a second. You hadn't acted here?
No.
Wow. So you went, I want to be an actor. Yep. I'm going to head to New York.
Yep.
And where were you training in New York to at least learn how to fucking do it before you auditioned for her?
Oh, so I've been training there probably about a year, I guess.
Oh, okay. Where?
Same place.
Oh, same place.
Yeah,
okay.
HB Studios. So
right.
I had another great teacher called Carol Rosenfeld, and she's since actually come out to Australia and run some masterclass a couple of times. And she was an incredible teacher too. But Uta is the one who is famous. So I spent probably about 3 years with her. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
that is amazing. I mean, because she would have been well into the later years of her life then too.
Yeah. Well, she died. I think it was. I came back to Australia in about 2000 and maybe 2000. I can't remember. I was there in
9 years. Right?
9 years in New York and 2 years in LA. And when I came back, I think I'd heard that she'd passed away. She'd had a stroke before that. She was on stage, I think, and she either had a stroke on stage or she had a stroke whilst in the run of this play. She was doing a play with David Hyde Pierce, who's off Fraser.
Oh, okay.
So they were doing a play in Los Angeles together.
Niles.
So yeah, I think that's it. And so she passed away shortly after that. But yeah, no, I spent about 3 years with her, and I auditioned. So we she had a general scene study class, and then she had a Shakespeare class. So I auditioned for the general and the Shakespeare, and so I spent time in both classes, and it was very, very different. It was amazing. She's an amazing teacher.
And how do you compare that style of teaching back then with someone who had come from 3 or 4 generations before your generation in that class? Was it the sort of horror stories of when you're fucking up or you're not prepared that you just get torn to shreds? I mean, did you need therapy after you finished the class?
Before, during, and after.
Yeah.
Well, she was amazing because, and it's quite funny you mentioned therapy, because I coming from Australia, it was really interesting because I had that very strong, macho sort of persona. And then I got to New York and I got on stage and I could cry and be angry. And rather than getting like berated for it, I was like, people were applauding. I was like, what's this about?
Yeah.
And so it was very freeing. And I remember sitting in Uta's class when I just got in, and I was sitting in one of the back rows, and behind me there were these actors and actresses, and they were talking about their therapy sessions. I was like, "Jeez, what's that?" And they were so open about it. So, it's amazing. A lot of people are in therapy there. But to go back to the teaching, she was very succinct. She was very direct. So there was no bullshit. It was just very honest. So it was like, I remember the first thing I did for it in the contemporary class, and it's an interesting class because there's probably 25, 30 people in the class, and a lot of them are established actors already. So there's and she's a bit of a celebrity teacher, I guess. So there's a bit of pressure. So I remember waiting backstage, and because there was a big curtain behind the before you came on to the stage to perform, and there's lots of furniture and lots of props.
She's a big fan of the props.
Yeah, big time, yeah. But I remember sitting back there and my heart was beating so fast that I was like, literally, I thought I'd walk on stage and my shirt would be covered.
Crazy, isn't it?
So I remember the first thing I did for her, I played Cliff in Look Back in Anger, John Osborne, and I did it the first time and she gave me some notes, and I did it the second time because you'd always rework it maybe, a couple, 2, 3, 4 times. And she said, "Oh, that was worse than the first time."
Because they fuck you up, right? Then you start overanalyzing and you're going against your original choices and what have you. And it does do that until you recalibrate again after another crack, and then you start that process back. But at least that, in my own experience, and certainly on the weekend, I came into that class with a completely different take on what Creve had already done. He's already directed Danger Close, and it was a scene from Danger Close.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And he shot with Richard Roxburgh and Travis Fimmel.
Yeah, right.
I was Richard Roxburgh's part.
Yeah.
And Richard Roxburgh has a very unique, a lot of the roles he played, in my experience, are villainous or cowardice, because he's just got that thing, even in Rake, where I don't think he is the villain, he's still a junkie, and there's that kind of deceptiveness and what have you, and that's what this character's like. And not that I've had enough time in the game to really know what I can and can't do, but certainly at a quick shot, that is not my brand or what have you. So I interpreted it completely different, because in this scene he's very strong, and he's like, nah, you're not a great colonel or whatever. You're weak. Your knees buckle at the sight of blood. And I was like, oh fuck. How do I don't know how to spin this. It was an interesting thing that came out of the class. I can hear what you're saying. I know exactly what you mean. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, what was interesting with her, she was quite amazing because she taught for so long. I mean, basically how it came about, her teaching, is she was an actress, and she was married to an Austrian guy called Herbert Berghoff.
Right.
And he founded a studio in New York called the HB Studio. And his philosophy was that acting should be available to anyone, no matter what their socioeconomic status is. So you could actually work in exchange for classes. And I think he had not-for-profit status. So classes with Uta, when I was there, was $7 a class. Before that, it was $3.50. So, and she would teach like for that, even though she could have charged much more.
Yeah.
So what she did is, through her acting, she realized that there was no sort of real technique for actors. I mean, she wasn't, she disagreed with the method. So she spun off from that. I think Herbert might have been one of the founding... Stanislavski and Lee Strasberg and so on. And I think Herbert might have been one of the founding members of the Actor Studio. So she wanted to create a technique which is very specific and very straightforward. So she had those 6 steps. Who am I? Where have I come from? What do I want? What's my obstacle? So on.
How am I going to get it?
Yeah. And so when she'd teach, she was very... she's like a laser in a sense. She'd just be... you need to work on this, this, and this. So it was like boom, boom, boom. But very kind. When you do a scene and you do it well, she'd be laughing, she'd be crying, she's full on, She had this, amazing voice, and she was just so into the scene. She was really generous. So she wasn't one of those teachers that really tore you down for the sake of breaking you, to build you up, or some of that nonsense,
which is fucked. Yeah,
I don't agree with that at all. I mean, but she was honest. If you didn't do well, she'd be just like, okay, you haven't done well. This is why. Boom, boom, boom. And there was only ever a few things. And a lot of students actually had to go off to other teachers to get it interpreted sometimes, because it's almost that thing of studying with a new teacher. You don't know the language yet.
Yeah.
So I'd often go to Carol Rosenfeld and ask her and say, what does this mean? And she'd explain the whole thing, because she studied with her as an actress for years and then went on to teach as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's really, that's interesting that you say that, because when we finished up the class, and my mate who came with me, he did really well in his scene, and Kriv was like, sweet, so we were talking about it. And then the director of the Actors Hub in Sydney is actually a fellow I used to party with like 10, 11 years ago at a thing called Raft Up, which is a big boat party on Boxing Day of every year on Rottnest Island. Huge. Anyways, we were all having a beer afterwards and just discussing how the class went. And he said, so how did your scene go? And I explained to him that I wasn't quite getting it. And what Creve was saying to me was, I just don't believe you. I can see it's all there.
Yeah.
I just don't believe it yet. And this guy's monologue was really long. And of course he was delivering it really, really slowly. So I was sort of having to sit there. He's like, be still, but not, I was like, I know what you're trying to say. And so anyways, we were talking about that, and I said, he was able to see what needed to change. And I said, my acting coach that I probably used the most, Miles Pollard, he knows how to see that and then tell you how to change it. And that's his gift. That's what makes him quite unique, and why I've been using him ever since. And so then Oliver revealed to me that they have because they've opened up a school in Perth now. And Miles is based in Dunsborough.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll start to bring him into classes and what have you. Yeah. And I think, so that ties into what you were saying. It's like, I get it, but I still don't know how to do it. So I can take that. So now I've emailed Miles, said, this is what he said. Tell me how.
Yeah.
And how can I spin it? If my interpretation is wrong, how can I quickly do it? Like if I'm on set and they're like, that's not it.
Yeah.
You've only got 2 more takes. Find it. You know what I mean? That's fucking tough.
Well, it was interesting because with Uta, she was an amazing teacher and just really gifted, and she just had I think from doing it for so many years that because she started out with the Luntz, who are a very famous theatrical couple, and she did Virginia Woolf, and she's just been working for many years, and so by the time I studied with her, she must have been in her 70s. That's 50 years or 55 years of just doing it, and I think that just trains your eye somehow, where you just see things.
You've seen patterns so many times.
Yeah, and she knows how to fix it, and she can see you, and she's very present. And but it's interesting because the other teacher I had a lot of, who was an amazing teacher, Carol Rosenfeld, she studied as an actress with Uta, but her teaching style was completely different, because Carol would just go, okay. And then she'd go on this spiel for about an hour, and she'd go all around the world, and she's in her 80s, she's 80 now.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, her life energy is amazing, and she's just so full on, and she'd go all around the world and come back and like, okay. And I was like, yep, got every word. Because she would talk about life and and I'm big on now about as an actor, go out and live your life, go out and have a lot of experiences, and that makes you what you,
and draw on them.
Yeah, what you are, and she was amazing like that. But then a lot of people would be with her, they'd be like, "What did you just say?"
Yeah, I got lost.
Yeah.
I guess that's the secret, isn't it? It's being able to then let them all come out when you're sat there. It's certainly the thing that I identify and aspire to the most. I remember listening to Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert De Niro talking about it. The story's already there in you. If you can just fucking sit there and let it come out, because if you're worrying about your lines and you're worrying about all this stuff, it closes it off. And that's what was happening to me. I look back at what he was filming and I'm like, I can't see it. I'm terrible at self-regulating, like, and looking and going, oh, that needs work. That's probably one of my weaknesses.
Yeah.
And I think it comes from having procrastinated about being an actor for so long that when I finally did it, still to this day, I'm so proud of myself for actually doing it that I think that everything I've done is epic. Yeah. Look at you. You're up there killing it. Good on you. You know, and then the teacher goes, buddy, this is rubbish. What are you doing? Yeah. Oh, really? Is it? I can't see it. That was how a name I won't mention cut me down in TAFTA. He's like, what would you give that out of 10?
Yeah, right.
And I was like, about a 7.
Yeah.
It's like, I give that about a 1. And he's like, I can see you have no training. You don't know how to breathe. You didn't know what you were talking about. You didn't know where you were going, what you were doing, how you were going to do it. I have no idea what that scene was about. It's like, fuck. Well, yeah. Brutal. So you studied with Uta for 3 years, did you say?
About 3 years, yeah.
And then, but you were for another 5 in New York.
Yeah, I studied at a lot of different places, and I actually took a break from Uta because she, I think she stopped teaching for a while. She'd been teaching for years, and she stopped for a while, and then she came back and she ran a masterclass, and essentially it was there's probably about 25 people in the class, and it was by invitation only, and there was mainly just teachers, and I wasn't a teacher at that point. And there were probably, I think, 4 or 5 students, and I got lucky to be invited to that, so I did that for a semester, and the semester there was 19 weeks, and the whole focus of the semester was like keeping a performance spontaneous and fresh, no matter how long you've worked on it. It was mainly theatre training, and so I worked on one scene for 19 weeks.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so one 5-minute scene, so I did it 19 times.
My first, your 19 weeks tale there, the first acting thing that I ever did was a perf actors, whatever thing. It was this woman from Denmark who came out and tried to start an acting school. And I think she might be still going, but in the beginning, she wasn't great. And she just did that. She gave everyone a scene and you rehearsed it for fucking like 2 months with not much notation. Just get up there and do it, and maybe it'll be better than the last time. She wasn't an acting coach, but she studied at the Actors Studio in New York.
Oh, right.
She should have been a lot better.
Oh, right.
I think she was an okay actress, just not a great teacher.
What was her name?
Fucking no idea off the top of my head.
That's a strange name.
Yes. God, what was her name? It'll come to me while we're talking.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm doing this a lot at the moment. Maybe it's baby brain.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, and it was all to lead towards a show reel. So you just auditioned it. Not auditioned, you just performed it for fucking 20 weeks, and then you did the reel. Yeah. And then I went and did my workshop with Miles, and trying to grab that mic. Oh. And then he had a look at the reel, and he was like, "Yeah, I mean, there's nothing happening here. You know, this is 3 minutes of I don't know what. Yeah. There's no intention. I don't see an objective. It's just fluff." So he was a big Meisner guy. So we got into a lot of that. So you had a break, or Uta had a break, but you stayed on in the States for a period of time doing refresh.
Doing theatre, a lot of theatre, independent films, TV, whole range of things.
And how did you manage to stay at that time? What was the visa situation like?
Oh, it's probably changed now, but I had a student visa for, I think, about 4 years.
Oh,
and
okay.
I was sponsored a couple of times by agents, so I managed to...
Oh, that's great. So like an 01, or what they call an 01 now.
It was different back then. I can't remember the name of it. And then when it came time to renew it, I was in New York for September 11, and then I moved to LA a little bit after that, and then it came time to renew the visa, and I was thinking about applying for a green card or something like that. And I never tried acting in Australia, so I thought I'd come back and
You got
Came
stuck.
back and met my wife, got kids.
Yeah, right.
This is it.
And has that ever been part of the conversation? You know, like if I book something and we have to go, we're going?
Not really. I mean, my wife had a thing where she wanted to go to Germany for a long time, be an opera singer, and it just sort of no. I think it's something we haven't really discussed. We'd probably have to discuss it if it happened.
Right.
Yeah.
So I remember when I met my wife, I had just come back from living in New York.
Yeah.
It was still very much, and still is very much in my blood. And as far as I'm concerned, that's home to me.
Yeah.
Always has been
Yeah.
since I was out there when I was 19. I've never felt Australian. Like, it's just a weird thing. And I'm very happy here, obviously, and a baby on the way and all that kind of stuff. And it's an incredible place to raise a family. But I don't know how old you were. Well, you would have been mid-30s when you met your wife?
No, I was late. I was 40, I think.
Oh, right. Yeah, so it's different when you...
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, so I was 36 when I met Erica, and you have a different set of priorities when you're later in life and you meet. And so that was always part of the initial conversation. If you want to sign on to this adventure, that's part of it. You know, if something happens and I get the opportunity to go, we're going. I'm going, straight up. But I did say to her, what I won't do is drag us out there without something to go to. So it's got to be to go to something, not just to meander and other. I can do that with little month trips. With flights, you can get over there pretty easily now. That's fine. I've got a good friend of mine, Anthony Sharp, who's in that situation. He's in his early 40s. His wife's a performer as well. She's 50. They've got a little girl. She's 10. And he'll go out once a year or something and just keep his finger on the pulse a little bit, do 2, 4, 3 weeks out there, come back, regroup. And it's been beneficial. Like, once he started doing that a bit more, he's just, and if you're good at networking and just driving that home a little bit, it makes a big difference. So when you finished up, like, what happened with New York? You just decided, I'm done?
No, I think well, when I finished with Uta, I didn't really finish with Uta. It was just sort of ongoing, and then I think she'd had a break from memory for a few years, and when she came back and I did that class where we just worked on the one scene, I think she might have finished teaching after another term of that, and I think this must be I'm terrible with dates, but I got to a point and I thought, well, I've never tried Los Angeles. I've got to try Los Angeles. And I think because I'd been there for 9 years and I'd just done what I wanted to do. I just, trained with lots of different places and I'd lived the life there for a long time. And I thought, well, it's time to try something else. And in retrospect, I sort of regret not going to Los Angeles first because that's where all the film and TV is, and that's why you see all the Australian actors going straight there now. And New York was mainly theatre back then, independent film,
for sure,
and little bits of TV. But
and they shot all the TV that was set in New York and LA as well, which is now being reversed actually.
Oh right.
Oh yeah, like New York is now cheaper than LA to shoot, so a lot of those New York shows, they're all New York. They're there. Right. Yeah, it's great. Like, even I was watching Fallon talk to James Spader the other day about his show Blacklist. And he's like, so do you shoot in New York? He's like, we shoot everything in New York.
Yeah, wow.
And then, that's a 20 episode a season big show. Wow. And when I first went out there, that was the vibe from other actors that I was photographing, was this turn, and that's what my agent was saying.
Yeah, okay. Wow.
And I thought that's really, really interesting. Yeah. And good to see, because I hate when I see that, not a fake shot, but it's the stock image of New York or whatever, and then you go to the studio and you're like, they're not fucking there. Like, it's so much nicer when they're there, and you can see them walking along the Brooklyn Bridge or whatever. Where in New York were you?
God, I was just to go back to that for a second. I think when I was there was the soap operas. So there was Guiding Light. There was God, I can't remember. So there's a few soap operas, and there was, I think, Law and Order was there, and there was only a handful of TV shows, and everything else was in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
When I first moved there, I was in Chelsea, and then I moved all over. I was in Harlem, I was in Brooklyn, I was in Astoria, in Queens, I was in Lower East Side, Upper West Side, Upper East Side, and probably the most time I spent was 3.5 years in Little Italy.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. What was that like?
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
I had a old tenement building there, and I was on the 5th floor, and I used to sit out in the fire escape and watch all the people go by, and it was really interesting because it was very old world Italian, and I think Scorsese might have been born or grown up like a couple of doors from there.
Yeah.
And you'd have a butcher shop right next to me, and it was a little old lady. Her name was Mary, and she was about 96 years old, and her son was about 75. And they ran this butcher shop.
Wow.
And across the road was a hardware store, and the guy was probably about 80. And you go into the hardware store, and everything had dust over it, and you're like,
"You're actually selling anything? This is just a front." Yeah.
But it was very much like that, and all the families would play. It was amazing. The families would play on the street in summer. It was sweltering, so they'd have the little pools they put.
God,
it
bakes
street.
there in the summer.
And then slowly, I think towards the end of my time, they started to gentrify it. So people started buying up these places, and there was a little corner deli on the corner of I was in Elizabeth Street and what was it? Prince Street, I think it was. So I was between Houston and Prince.
Oh yeah.
And there's a little deli on the corner, and they used to sell, like bacon and eggs or sausages and eggs for like $2. And then some people bought it and they made it really swanky, and the same bacon and eggs was now $10.
Oh, right, pricks. The gentrification of New York.
Well, it completely changed. It was sort of changing slowly, and then the butcher and the hardware store stayed till they were surrounded by all these modern bars and everything. But they stayed till I don't know if they're still there, but yeah.
When was the last time you were there?
God, I went back for a trip. God, it must be at least 10 years ago, I'd say. It's a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I was there in exactly 10 years ago as well, actually. And it had even just the population of Australians in New York. I mean, you will know this more than me, but I was there in 99 and they were beside themselves with listening to how you spoke.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then I was out there living in 2014 and it's like, meh.
Yeah.
They're so used to it now. Like, God damn it. Yeah. I just thought it was just all this. Women were going to be handed to me like it was in the late 90s. But not anymore. I had to work,
Yeah. Well, it was interesting in terms of that too, because in terms of acting, there weren't many Australian actors there. So
just what's his name?
LaPaglia.
Oh, yeah. And your mate from Crocodile Dundee.
Oh, Paul Hogan, yeah. But LaPaglia, I think he was based there,
right.
or based in somewhere in America, maybe Los Angeles. But he was there, I think, at that time, and there weren't many Australians there. It was interesting because where I studied, there were a lot of foreign students because they offered the student visa. So there's people from all over the world there, but there's probably 4 or 5 Australians, and that was, in terms of acting, it was pretty small. I don't think I knew more than a dozen Australians there.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But now,
it's a crazy town.
Now, but I assume they've all gone to Los Angeles anyways, because that's where they're.
Well, it's easier to get a visa for New York State than it is Los Angeles, and it's cheaper.
Ah, right.
So, I mean, certainly it was my plan was to utilize that. It's like half the cost, and they hand them out a lot easier, and there's less TV actors in New York with lots of great. I mean, I got a role which I had to turn down in Bridge of Spies.
Oh, Jesus. What happened?
So I apply on casting networks or whatever, and the casting director rings me up. I want to say his name is Billy Dowd. Rings me up, and it was untitled Steven Spielberg film with Tom Hanks being shot in my I don't know what you call like Dumbo inside of Brooklyn. I don't know what you'd call it. You wouldn't call it a suburb or a province, but anyways, an area. I don't know. Anyways, I was living in Dumbo, And he's like, "You're on. You know, you'll be an FBI agent. We're going to cut your hair, shape, and this and this and this and that." And I didn't have a visa.
Oh, jeez.
You know, I was just doing work under the table, and there was no way I could rock up on a major production without a social security and union and blah, 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 blah. And in my mind, I was like, so I rang my agent. He said, "No, you can't fucking do that." And so I rang this guy back and said, "Look, my agent won't let me shave my beard off. I've got something coming up. I made up some fucking story." And he was like, "Nice save." And I thought, well, that's probably just background extra, you know, of 20, 30 FBI agents at some fucking thing. And then I watched the film, and maybe that scene does exist and it got cut. But the only scene in that film where there was more than the two main FBI agents, there was like 5. And he was sharing the scene with Tom Hanks and Rylance and the Mark Rylance? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, "You motherfucker." Would have been so cool. Hey, you were on Preacher recently. Tell me about that.
I did 3 days on it.
That's 3. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was quite funny because I was cast and literally the casting process was interesting because I got a call from my agent on I can't remember which day it was, but my wife was working. She works 12-hour shifts, and I had both my kids. And I got the script and they said, "Can you put down a self-test this afternoon?" So I was like, "Oh, God, how am I going to do this?" So I took my kids to the park and learnt the lines where they're playing, and came back and shot it. And then I had to do a slate. And I couldn't figure out how to do a slate, because the whole audition, I basically sat down in the chair and I just sort of leaned forward and pressed the button and then just did it and made like I was looking at something.
Yeah, right.
And then I had to do the slate, but you have to do a full body shot. So I was like, how am I going to do this? So I was like, God, I'll get my son to do it. So I got Leon. I called him upstairs. He's 6, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to say, you know, hi, my name's Mick, blah blah blah. You know, then press when I go like that, press the button, and then when I go like that, press the button again." He's like, "Oh, yeah, okay." So he presses the button, and I go, "Hi, I'm Mick, blah blah blah." Do the profiles and everything, do it perfectly, and then I'm like that, and my son goes. 20 takes later.
Oh, shit.
So all of a sudden, Raph comes upstairs and he's like, "Oh, that was it." And they're like, "Dad, that was terrible." So, never act with your kids. So the actual audition was 1 take. I was just like, I just got to do it and get it off. And the slate was about 20 takes. But yeah, so I got cast and went along to shoot these few days. And it was the last episode of... just a small part, but the last episode of the last episode of the last season ever.
Oh, shit.
And I got there and I was partnered up with the main characters and I had a wife in it. And I got the script and I went, shit, I have no idea what's going on. Because, you know, it's about, you know, God and and vampires and all that.
He channels the power of God or something like that. And yeah, his mate's a vampire and his dad. And then he's got the former love interest that they're on the road looking for God. And yeah, I only watched the first 2 seasons and I kind of dialed out a little bit. But the first season was brilliant. And there's the kid with the asshole mouth.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
God, that would be painful.
Yeah.
Even Noah Taylor was in it was playing Hitler in Hell. Yeah. So how did you get over that hurdle?
Well, it was really good because the guy who played God, we had most of our stuff with him. He was Mark was his name. I can't remember his last name, but he was great. So he just sat with us and explained everything because the dialogue made no sense at all.
Right.
But shooting it was a really interesting experience because the main body of the work was in a like a coliseum, and so there's probably 100 extras and big crews and cameras and big dolly and so we shot with, and it was a very intense experience because I'd only got the notice that I was being shooting the night before, and I was actually teaching, and I had to be on set at like 4 a.m. So I had the dialogue, and I was like, I've always talked about preparation. It was still in my in my head, trying to remember what it was. And we got there, and there's lots of commotions. There's this apocalyptic scene where it's the end of the world, and everybody's clapping, and there's all the extras, and God comes on, and there's all this stuff, and so there was a lot of really intricate work where the extra would stop clapping, and then you have to speak, and then there's all these different cues, and then we shot. I think the beginning of the scene, then the end of the scene, the middle of the scene, then the beginning of the scene, the end of the scene. It just kept going back and forth for all the different angles because it was such a huge thing. And I was literally on set at some points going, and they're like, okay, roll camera, and I'm like, what the fuck is my line? And so I had a little cheat sheet, and I pull it out and go like that. So it was pretty stressful in that regard.
Yeah. That's fuck. Oh, geez, I'd be peaking.
But I guess that's the thing about doing it for a long time is I'm pretty okay at staying calm and staying focused and just putting it all in perspective. So, but it was an amazing experience. The director, Sam Catlin, was, it was lovely. He was great. And the actor we worked with was terrific. And
what's his name? Dominic?
No, Dominic was in one of the scenes I was in. But the main actor that we worked with he plays God. He's Mark.
Right. He's not God. Okay. Because I missed. So I don't think I've actually met, in terms of my viewing experience, the guy who plays God. I just remember his right-hand man or whatever, the bald-headed fella in the white suit who was in The Crown and what have you. So is the guy that you're talking about Aussie or American? Or?
No, he's American.
He's American.
Yeah.
Did you have to do it in an American accent?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a nice little win, though, Yeah,
I haven't used the accent for a while, so.
Right. There's another thing you're having to polish.
Yeah.
And so I guess now it's up to your agent to utilize that little fact, and when you get some footage, and that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen it yet. It's released.
Is it?
Yeah.
Fuck, they smash it out quick these days, don't they?
Yeah.
Getting back to what we were talking about at the beginning, where there's independence. Look, I've got a film that I shot, that I co-wrote, produced, acted in December last year, and it's still in the editing room. And there's been lots of other reasons for that.
Yeah.
But, fuck, a year to get a short film out of the gate. Obviously money changes everything.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of work to making a film, writing it, directing it, producing it. I mean, I did a few in New York, and I know how much work it is. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it really, really is. Talking what you were talking about before with the scripts, I was listening to off camera yesterday, a podcast, and they film it, but it's like high profile actors. I don't know if you've Tom Jones, I think his name is. Sam Jones. Sam Jones is the guy. He's a professional photographer and a director. But he was talking to Olivia Wilde, who's just directed her first film, and she was in Vinyl, which was that HBO series that Martin Scorsese directed.
Okay, yeah.
And she said Martin has a 0 scripts on set policy.
Oh, really?
Everyone has to be locked before they get there.
Yeah, wow.
And she did the same.
Yeah.
There's no asking for lines, cheating. You have it locked.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting from an American perspective, given how they audition. But so, mate, that's pretty much it for today. We'll wrap it up there. I really appreciate you coming down, man. It's good to catch up, and that's super fascinating about the your time in New York. I know that you touched on it in class, but of course we didn't get to that depth. And I remember you asking me on my first day there, here's a little bit about yourself, and I had said that I had literally just off the plane from New York, but we never got into it. And I hope you get to see Weevil soon, and we should get Mark on here.
Yeah, I reckon absolutely.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. All right, mate. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Josh.
See you, buddy.
Do we shake hands now?
We can shake.
It's been working out.